Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this PMA-CIBC Summit Series. Thank you to everyone in the audience today and in the industry for such strong support to keep this summit fresh and with new topics and discussions every month. For those of you viewing us on our YouTube channel, welcome and please subscribe and of course hit the like button so that our programming can reach more people. We need more people advocating for change in our industry. My name is Poon from PMA Brethour, and I'm thrilled to be back as your host today. For those of you who have been with us for the past 5 years here on the PMA-CIBC Summit, you'll recognize our returning panelists. But before we get to that, Andy will start us off with a short update on the market since we last saw you. Over to you, Andy.
Well, thank you very much, Grace. It's great to be with you all this morning. We are in most incredible times. This is history in the making all around us. To Grace, congratulations on your appointment as Vice President and Managing Director of PMA Research National, with now offices in Ottawa and Calgary out of the base in Toronto. And Grace has been came to us from CoStar and has been just an amazing addition to the family. And I'm thrilled that she takes this step into a bigger, broader role within the company. It's just a great to have you in charge here today, Grace, and what a fabulous panel we have. So I have the distinct pleasure of updating you a little bit on this market. I'm just going to focus on Toronto, not Ottawa or Calgary at the moment, but we can in future sessions, we can highlight those particular parts of the universe. I'm going to only give you good news this morning. How's that for positive mental attitude for little PMA? This market is not performing particularly well in terms of a general gross absorption. In fact, the Altus report out, Urbanation report out, the detail on the absorption levels is softer than expected and a bit shocking on the high-rise side. But this was predictable, has been in the play for some time. And on top of now 4 consecutive rate cuts, these are the first in 44 months. So I congratulate you all out there for surviving through this period of turmoil and this direct hit on the housing industry. It's been dramatic and it's been deep. These numbers that are coming out for our monthly numbers are, for the first time actually that I go back in our database to 1981, but for the first time since the recession of the early 90s, low rise outperformed high rise in September. Now the numbers are very small. High rise is operating at about 15% of their 10-year average, just 250 odd sales in the month of September, and low rise operating at about 40% of its capacity. But the low rise side is percolating, it's strengthening. The early adapters are in the market as we speak. Treasure Hill, Paradise, Andren, Ballymore, Fieldgate. I can point to multiple projects that have seen for the first time, and I was out on the weekend at several new openings, and for the first time we had decent, solid traffic. And for the first time we saw decent, solid deals. Now this is in response, it's early, and they are the early adapters. It's a market responding to the cut in rates, the 50-point basis cut of a week ago. It's too early to measure its impact, but clearly, in the field on the weekend were consumers buying new housing based upon the best possible deal they're going to get, they expect in a long time, and the best rate yet to come. So anyone with a 12 or 18-month closings looking at significant, even though they're fixed rates, CIBC this morning at just over 5% on long-term money, but near 4% in the low 4s on short-term 120-day money. So once this creeps into the consumer's mindset of the best deal you're going to get is now against the best rate forthcoming over the next several months. So the consumer will react slowly. There are serious infrastructure issues of debt carry, of credit cards at their max, of inflationary pressures and other price movements that are causing the consumer to be cautious and careful. But they're in the market today and will continue to be, and this will get better. We will look back on this period of the fall of 2024 as the first green shoots of recovery. We'll look back on this as the low ebb of our marketplace, of the most difficult period of time. I mean, it's only perfectly evidenced in the resale market, where we've surged over 25,000 listings, one of the largest supply levels that we have ever seen. And in fact, anything over 25,000 is clearly and totally and unbiasedly a buyer's market, except that we have no buyers, or very few. But I do point out that even the resale condo market is holding up very, very well and produced nearly 30% of sales for the month and for the year to date. So the price adjustments and the corrections that have occurred in resale are being met with a little quiet percolating surge of demand, and that will only improve as we move forward. As we head into 2025, and I know some of you have laughed at me at my line of stay alive till 25, but that's becoming more evident as we watch for the first quarter and the second quarter of 25, where rates will continue to move downward. We're at 3.75 Bank of Canada. We're likely going to be at 3.25. It might even slip by year end under 3 to 2.75. That's certainly from CIBC, from Benjamin Dahl's projections, to under 3 by year end. But the cuts are going to come faster and deeper than we expected. Now, it's not great for my little trip to Florida next week or the week after. I went out for a couple of weeks, but because the Canadian dollar is at a low ebb, and as these rate cuts get more and more aggressive to maintain and improve Canadians' GDP, our Canadian dollar is going to suffer. So we're going to see a little bit of pushback on the Canadian dollar, 72, hovering between probably 70 and 72 cents. So sorry, snowbirds, but that's going to be a bit of a tricky one over these next several months. But the good news is that this rate cuts will come faster and more aggressively than when they went up. So in this period over these next several months is really the first indicators of growth, improvement in demand. By spring, you'll see the first evidence of price movement. Now, it'll be very modest because the supply side will surge ahead, both on low rise in particular and on the resale market specifically. In high rise, we've got an oversupply situation that's going to take some time to correct. This may take as much as 2 years. It may be late 26 and early 27 before the traditional high rise market comes back to solidity. It has to maneuver on that and clean up some of the hangover of inventory, and we're still feeding the inventory market over 25 and 26 to the tune of 24, 25,000 units a year. So the absorptions are only running in the neighborhood of 10 or 11,000 annually. So we've got a ways to go to clear that inventory on high rise. But the game will be played out on the low rise market, in a tremendously strengthening market in that era through the spring of 25, and much better into later 25 and early 26. One of the areas where Bank of Canada, we'll encourage them, they'll meet in December. I encourage all of you out there to send them a note. Please adjust, modify, change, delete the mortgage qualifying rate. They've done so, the MQR as it's called, the stress test. They've done so to the banks on renewals, and they've done it on transfer of mortgages. What that does, though, is kind of clog up the resale market. Once I've done my renewal, I'm going to stay where I am. I don't necessarily want to jump down into this new marketplace of uncertainty. So it needs to be modified for the new housing benefit. And that, what I'm suggesting, is a more dynamic change or penetration of this particular policy. The 2 points that are added on today are pushing down demand levels. They're causing greater caution, and the ability, particularly of the entry-level buyer, to qualify is strained. So let's make it dynamic. Okay, leave it in place. It was a good policy in 2017. It helped us tremendously probably through this last little period. But we've taken it off resale renewal. We've taken it off transfer of mortgages. Let's take it off the first time buyer and below $1 million. So under $1 million, seems like that seems a little ludicrous, doesn't it? $1 million for a first time buyer, but let's take it off the 2 points. Let's leave it at 1% up to $1.5 million and leave it in place at 2 points above $1.5 million or 2 million. Those that can afford that level can afford to qualify and perhaps aren't taking on or are perhaps taking on the highest level of debt, but it's all in the ratio for each consumer. So give us a break here in December when you review that, make it a dynamic policy so that it flexes with the marketplace. So the good news is we've got a percolating market that's improving into the spring. It's going to get better and better. Please watch for our new January subscription based to Anderson Brethour report, which looks at housing economics and housing data in Toronto, Ottawa, and Calgary. I think you'll find that really interesting. You'll get a free copy in the next week or so. And that will tell the tale and tell some projections and forecasts that we're working on that actually Grace is working on. Let me turn it back to Grace, and you can introduce this incredible panel and our subject for today, which is very fascinating and a lot about the consumer and where they stand and where they're going. Grace Poon, Managing Director, PMA Research, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Now we know many of you have questions for our panelists, so we want to encourage you to type your questions in the Q&A box below, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's begin. We've called in Sherry Speakman, National Manager Builder Development for CIBC, many times. We really appreciate the perspective she can give us from a frontline perspective on the consumer experience, reaction, and on-the-spot trends. And of course, your candor and no-nonsense solutions. Pauline Lierman is the Vice President, Market Research for Zonda Urban, and she is a regular speaker and industry panelist across Ontario and Quebec, and also a strong voice and leader in real estate research. Finally, you will all remember each year with Kiki Sauriol-Roode, Vice President, Business Development. Sagen unpacks the Sagen 2024 Annual Homeowner Trends and Financial Fitness Survey. So welcome back, everyone. This morning, Kiki has graciously let us frame our conversation on some of the key highlights and findings from the survey. So we've developed a great hour where as a group we'll elaborate, talk about evidence we've seen in the market, and maybe come up with some ideas and solutions as we review some interesting, some surprising, and some results you will nod in agreement with. But first, I would like to turn it over to Kiki to give us a high-level overview of the survey to help us set the stage. Kiki?
Grace, thank you so much for inviting me back again, and certainly to PMA Brethour and CIBC for continuing this really important work of bringing the industry together with regularity and talking about the issues that are impacting all of us. And so as you articulated, we will be in this session talking about the survey results of our 2024 Homeownership Trends and Financial Fitness Survey. We do this every year, and Environics is a third party that conducts this on our behalf. And the findings are very interesting. What we'll do today, let me just get to the next screen, is take you through the results of the Financial Fitness Index. We'll talk about some home ownership and buyer confidence trends. We'll talk about housing affordability solutions. And Andy certainly touched on a few things that we heard in our survey, and that after many, many years of government relations initiatives we have now seen will enter the market towards the end of this year. We'll talk very briefly about mortgage ownership and some renewal intention behavior, and then talk specifically about how newcomers to Canada, who are making up a large proportion of first-time buyers, how their behavior differs from general population. So let's get right into the information. Very quickly, for all the lawyers in the room, we'll take you through the methodology really quickly. We were in market in March of this year. and did 2,100 interviews. And it's statistically significant, so we can extrapolate this information across the industry. We will be back in market in March of 25. And what I can tell you is, of course, since that time, we have seen a number of interest rate reductions. Inflation has moved down. It takes a while for the community to absorb that. So we will expect in 25 to see slightly different results in financial fitness trending. But I think what's important is some similar work that folks like Mortgage Professionals Canada does really validate some of this March work, in that they were in market with similar questions in September. So let me tell you about financial fitness. This is not a consumer confidence index. It is asking Canadians how they feel about their financial well-being today and in future. And it is a metric we've set at 100 when we first started doing this with the Canadian Association of Credit Counseling in 2011. We saw a brief dip in 2012, but then a steady growth, as you can see in this trend line. In March of 2020, it was as high as we had ever seen. And then it dropped in May of 2020. Well, I told you we do this every March. And so once we get the survey results back and do some analysis, we're ready to typically release in May. But in May of 2020, we felt it was not an appropriate reflection of what might be happening in the market. And I'm sure all of you remember what happened in that time frame. We were just in the throes of early days of COVID. There was a lot of uncertainty. We had not yet seen a variety of measures put in place that resulted in an rebound of financial fitness. So we went back in market in May, and we did see that folks were more concerned about their financial well-being at that time, rightfully so. But at 98.5, it still was in the 2015 to 2017-ish range. And it's because folks were feeling good about their financial well-being because savings and home equity build and a variety of other things were in place. 2021, we saw that rebound, and it started to come back down again. To echo some of what Andy mentioned happened in the last 4 years, we started to see interest rates rise. Inflation was on the rise. And even in 2023, we saw that metric come down again, still not below the 100% mark. But then this year, you know, what we saw was really the peak of these interest rates, as well as inflation that was really driving a lot of folks' concern around their financial well-being. Later in this presentation, we'll show you how the first-time home buyer and how the newcomer to Canada trends relative to the general population that you're seeing here. But little quick, don't want to ruin the surprise, but they're very confident groups and trend above general population. So let's move forward and just get into some real high level details. We asked folks how you're feeling about your financial well-being, and the looking good and looking great segment has fallen over the last few years. You can see we're tracking 2020 through 2024. And the vulnerable and alert group is growing. So it's important. People were feeling challenged and less confident about their overall well-being. But the first-time buyer and the future intender, and you'll hear me talk a little bit about future intender in this presentation, that is a group that is demonstrated interest in purchasing within the next 0 to 24 months. That is the future intender. And for a lot on the call, that is our next customer. They are feeling more optimistic about their financial well-being, and we surmise that is because they are already in down payment savings mode. They've already adjusted some monthly budgeting, and they're also optimistic about the equity build that homeownership brings as opposed to a more rental scenario. So they're optimistic about the home buying process and what that will do to their long-term financial goals. We will not discount the news that you hear that people are stressed financially and that you're seeing delinquencies rise. While that is true, as a mortgage default insurer who tracks delinquency very, very carefully, we're seeing incredibly low rates of delinquency. So while they have risen, they've risen from a near record low. We are still in a low delinquency environment, well below it was before COVID, and well below normal historical rates. So to just give balance to the news that sometimes you hear that the majority of Canadians are one paycheck away from bankruptcy and delinquency, what we can tell you is the survey suggested that 5 times as many mortgage holders doubled up or made a lump sum payment recently than actually used the opportunity available in many mortgages to skip a payment. And so what that's telling us is that folks are absolutely in a position where they're making choices to ensure that they are taking care of that mortgage.
Thanks, Kiki. I just want to jump in for a second and get kind of the thoughts from Sherry and Pauline, because we've, as great as that sounds that, 5 times as many mortgage owners have been doubling up, we often also hear that people are doubling up because of hitting trigger points and not being able to afford. So I just wanted to get that insight from Sherry's perspective, and as well as Pauline, what they're hearing on their end, especially for Sherry at CIBC.
Well, thank you for lobbing that one over into my court. My personal opinion on this one, based on a lot of information we hear, and based on, and I'll be honest, even personal experience, to double up my payment or making a lump sum payment, I would have been trying to keep my amortization in a positive and not a negative. So my question would have been on this, when they're doing this survey, are they asking them why they're doing the double up or the lump sum payment? Because I would suspect that this is the reason why a lot of people were doing the double up or the lump sum, is to keep it out of a negative amortization, like Grace said, hitting that trigger point. You will, and on that other note, you find historically, the first thing you're going to do is ensure you make your mortgage payment. It's your car payment and your credit cards that get paid last, because you've got to maintain that roof over your head, especially if you have a family and children. You're also seeing extracurricular activities, go out off to the side as well, like a lot of registering for soccer or dance or any of those things for the children are being put on hold, because it's all about budgeting. What can I actually afford? So I agree that a lot of people won't go into default because the objective is to save their home, but that could be the other reason why we're seeing a lot more for sale signs, is they've realized the only way to be able to overcome this is to sell their home. But that's just what I'm seeing or hearing through talking to different people and experience and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think some certainly are doubling up payments to avoid trigger rates on variable rate mortgages. The interesting thing, though, that I would add is that this survey is of all folks that have mortgages, where this question was asked, and it's really only in the last couple of years that a good percentage of people have been taking variable rate. A lot of folks in this survey have had mortgages for a good period of time, so many would be fixed mortgage holders, and so that trigger point is not necessarily as relevant to why they'd be doing the doubling up. But for those with variable rate mortgages, no doubt this doubling up is an effort to ensure that they're not falling into negative amortization.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely fair. I think the interesting takeaway is just to have a different perspective than you're hearing in the news, that the majority of Canadians are so close to the tipping point. We're seeing folks find dollars to ensure that they're keeping their mortgage in a healthy position.
Yeah. Well, there's
Just
always the bank
sorry,
of mom and
Pauline,
dad
before I,
look for support.
sorry, Pauline, before I would like for you to just jump in on that too and see what you're seeing. But Kiki, there was a question from Jeff Johnson saying his understanding is that variable mortgages and negative amortizations were not actually showing up in delinquency reports. Is that correct, or what are your thoughts on that, or your knowledge?
Yeah, you know what? Our delinquency trending in the last 6 months, year, as I'd mentioned earlier, has gone up, but not materially. We are not seeing variable rate customers default any more so than we're seeing fixed rate customers. Typically, what's going to trigger a delinquency is not fixed or variable, it's whether there's been a job loss or something more material. And in our portfolio, we haven't seen a material shift to variable rate delinquencies over fixed.
Pauline, any thoughts you want to add to that?
I would think on this end, just I look at it from the pre-con perspective, and you know, just as a general rule, you don't always know exactly how much people have put down. I think there's always the assumption that they're scraping by on what they put into the system, but you know, just anecdotally, and I mean, in beyond recent years of investor-driven buying, that number was quite higher than what people would expect in terms of purchasing power on that. So they had money put up, and then. Just looking ahead, like I just look at this and I just say, okay, I know Andy touched on it a bit. You know, most of the time when there's interest rate changes or ad hoc changes to like amortization, availability, and lengthening or shortening, it takes about 6 to 8 months to run through the system. So now we're starting to kind of see that percolate through. So I really kind of look ahead. If you have a variable rate loan, maybe you're going to lock into a really great rate in 2025 at that point. So it might smooth the path from what we've been in, which has been pretty rocky through the pandemic. So
yeah. So if we shift gears a little bit and look at home ownership and buyer confidence trends, just to set the stage, and this reflects Statistics Canada census data from 2021, but in this particular survey, you can see the number of folks that own a home with no mortgage. Wouldn't that be great? 27%. Those that own with a mortgage has creeped up just a little bit over the last couple of years to 40%. And you can see that that renters and those that live with no rent, which would be my son who just graduated from university and is back at home, they've stayed relatively consistent over time. If we look at homeownership among 25 to 40-year-olds, over the last number of years, we've seen that dip down, and it is in part a function of affordability pressure, et cetera. So it has come down from 71% in 2015 down to 59% in this most recent survey that we did. You can see with millennials, it's crept up a little bit, and they're at 66% now home ownership rates, which is very similar to the overall Canadian rate of home ownership. So most millennials who have purchased for the first time have already done that, but we do expect that there will be a small percentage buying for the first time as you start to see the purchasing environment become a little more favorable, to Andy's point, as these rates come down and the green shoots in our industry are coming up for 2025.
Are we looking at this just seeing from the difference between home ownership 25 to 40 and then home ownership for millennials is 28 to 44? So that 7% delta, is it because it's gone higher due to removing that 25 to 27 age group and then adding that extra 4 years of maturity and having been more, more successful, if you want to call it that, but, being more stable, having, higher paying jobs? Yeah. Is that where that 7% is?
It is. It's a little bit more longevity in job tenure and income growth. It is, deeper in your life cycle. And so more family composition growth that would drive homeownership trends that we know typically is the case.
And for that survey, that 2,100, is it, do we have that span of from what age group? Is
We
it
did
just
18 plus, and we tried to do it so that it was statistically significant and looked at a cross range of Canadians.
okay, so there's no age group that was more targeted than another age group? Okay,
No.
perfect.
Yeah. And so we asked if people felt like it was a good time to buy, and it was relatively unchanged from 2023, which is fewer people thought it was a good time to buy than in 2021 and prior to that. And we won't exhaust the conversation, but that's in part because we saw house prices appreciate very quickly. From 2021 forward, we saw interest rates rise dramatically from historic lows, and we saw inflation really grow. So there were a number of factors that were suggesting to the Canadian population that maybe it wasn't a great time to purchase. That said, if we break out first-time buyers and future intenders, they're a more optimistic group. They're looking at getting into home ownership and beginning to build equity in their property. And so they, more so than general population, did think that it was a good time to buy. And really, again, it was about wanting to get into the building of home equity and moving away from a rental scenario. They're also, I mentioned to you, already in the position of saving for a down payment. And when the market was crazy hot, we all remember the days of multiple offer scenarios. And so some of these first-time buyers, future intenders, feeling maybe now's a good time and I won't have to compete, with 12 other people for a property. So those are some of the factors about why that group little over-indexed on thinking it was a good time to buy. And where are they buying? What we're seeing is that urban areas are continuing to lead as a community of choice. When we did this survey, certainly in the heart of COVID, when everybody was working from home, we started to see a lot more people moving out of urban centers and driving to where they could afford because house prices were on the rise dramatically, but also making different lifestyle choices because they were working from home. Maybe they needed 1-2 home offices, depending on how many people were working in the property. But of course, now in the last couple of years, we've seen that shift a little bit away from rural and exurbs or small towns back to suburban and urban areas because we're seeing employers ask people to come back to work, even, when it's 1 day a week. Those are commutes that people are willing to make, but the more that we're seeing folks being asked to come back 2 or 3 days a week, we're hearing from the real estate community and others that is driving people back to suburban and urban areas.
I would love to actually just talk about, interrupt and, get that thought. Is that what we're seeing? Like Pauline, I know that you do a wide span of research across those different types of products for people buying homes. Are you seeing that change, that market being in that urban area versus the rural area, and what that changing dynamic is like, what you're seeing?
I think it's just very incremental. I think the biggest thing is with the townhouse market coming back to where it is, and that's releases in places like Richmond Hill, Ajax, Pickering, Oakville, and established kind of communities aren't too far off from like where the historic cores are. So you're definitely seeing that demand, and a lot of it has to do with, like, as Kiki pointed out, like the price changes that occurred up to 2022 were like 20% increases year over year, and it wasn't always, Toronto. Everybody's focused on Toronto, but it was the 905 that had the hardest hit in terms of price changes at the very end of that kind of slope up in the market. So what we've seen now is price declines. There's been a recalibration on the low rise front in terms of like, well, at least $70,000 per unit on average sold. And units that maybe over $1 million now are below $1 million. So there's more offerings. Maybe they're slightly smaller. And condo pricing. I mean, condo is where the apartment market is in. Is a lot of strife right now. But it's been flat for 2 years. It's almost down maybe, I don't know, 0.4% on the front of that. So anything that comes out now is at least, you know, $150 per square foot lower than what it would have came out 2 years ago. So
Sherry, are you seeing that when you know, through mortgages, are you seeing people more in the urban areas? Are there just more difficult to get mortgages in the other suburban areas or ex-suburban areas because of larger houses, higher pricing, and that's why it seems like the data is saying that the urban area it's gone up significantly to 43 versus the other areas that have gone down. Are you seeing that kind of shift too?
I think no matter where you are, it's price and affordability. So, you know, maybe some are going back to the urban area, but what are they going back to? You know, like Pauline was saying. So do I want a townhouse at this cost? Or do I go east or west and get a small single family at this cost and do a commute 3 days a week? So no matter what, I truly believe, and I'm a parent of 5 adult children, it's all about affordability. What can I cost and what value am I going to get for my money? But it's also about lifestyle choices. How is it going to impact my work-life balance? And I think that's factored more today than it was pre-COVID. And I think the COVID has made us all take a step back and analyze what's important to me now.
I want to just
So,
kind of throw that
pardon?
thought out. We're talking about affordability, but I know we mentioned, you know, is it affordability that we're searching for or attainability?
Attainability. Attainability, I think, because we had this discussion the other day. Actually, it wasn't even a discussion, it was a debate. What's the definition of affordability? Well, who knows anymore? Is it a double wide in a field? You know, or is it a townhouse in the urban area? And I agree, it's availability. What's available to me in those price points? There's always a sweet spot in a price point for a purchaser to still be able to maintain the lifestyle and everything else. So I agree. I think we should change the word from affordability and make it attainability.
I'll add on to that. Sorry.
You know, please do.
I'll add on to that. Ironically, we had this discussion of attainability versus affordability. I looked over at my social media this morning and someone was torching the phrase attainable. And I was like, oh, but I mean, it doesn't do the market any service when we have so many different areas. And we're talking about buying houses and first-time buyers and stuff. And this is the bulk of what our discussion is. But when we talk about affordable, it gets muddled because we do have a serious social deficit problem on the social housing end. And how do we better term it so people understand that this is what we're striving for overall? I think there's just a lot of terminology and people, you know, they're busy. They don't have the time to spend it like we do, you know, doing research, right? You're Grace and I, to figure that out, that it would better serve us all if we understood those terms better, like in a branded way.
I think it does affect in the end on top of it's like the 3 A's. You have the affordability versus attainability. And I think we even mentioned accessibility because that you can see more and more home builders are focusing on these transit areas and, you know, pockets where it is already a community, a neighborhood where, you know, newcomers to Canada don't have a license yet and still getting settled in. Like they need to be able to walk down the street and go to, you know, the No Frills or the Sobeys or whatever, the grocery store and get, or the Walmarts, just to be able to, you know, buy their necessities, right? So I think it becomes that whole discussion of affordability, attainability, accessibility. And I think that's what's really shaping in the decisions of people buying things.
And it's interesting that you say that because you'll see a little deeper when we talk about newcomers to Canada that accessibility to transit, for the reasons you mentioned, Grace, is ranking very high in terms of decision on what and where they buy.
I think I'll just add on to another aspect is multi-generational. I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about this, but I mean, you know, you get your e-blast in all day long, you're on all these lists, and I've never seen so many different versions of, you know, side door entrance, multi-generational layout, optional this, optional that, than I have in the last, you know, 2 months. So it's definitely picking up. It's just how it's going to kind of work for everybody, kind of shared space. So something to definitely watch on that end as well.
I think it's how affordability is presented, perceived, and understood.
You're
Well,
right.
on that, let's maybe move into the affordability
Please.
conversation.
There's your segue.
So
Kiki.
that's what we've dubbed it. And we asked questions in the survey based on what you're seeing in the market. What are a number of items that you identify as possible solutions for affordability today in the market? And you can see right here. We've broken down the responses in 3 particular categories: increasing supply, decreasing demand, and affordability support directly. And what I've done, and there's too much to go over here in the time that we have, but what I've done is really highlighted where we've seen government response. For an insured mortgage, and Sagen works in the space of where individuals buying have less than a 20% down payment. So that's called a high ratio or insured mortgage. Over the last number of years where you've seen retraction of mortgage regulation, it's been in the insured space. In August, we saw the reintroduction of 30-year amortization only for first-time buyers, only buying new construction. In December, on December 15th, you will see that expand. So we are seeing longer amortization periods introduced for insured borrowers buying with less than 20% down. 30-year AM has been available for people buying with more than a 20% down payment. So this is impacting a very small part of the market. But arguably, these are younger folks that have more income generation ahead of them and working career. So 30-year amortization certainly seems reasonable if you're going to give it to an older Canadian as well. And it will help to lower the overall monthly mortgage payment. We've also seen for December 15th, the increase to the $1 million cap. And I heard Andy say it's interesting. It's hard to believe that, you know, insured borrowers or first-time buyers would buy over $1 million. But we've seen that age range grow of people putting off homeownership until they're a little older. And with inheritance trends happening in a way that people are actually gifting inheritance to their kids in some parts before they pass away, it is to help with down payment as an example. So we actually do see a good number, not a material number, but a portion of Canadians that want to get in the market with 5 or 10% down, but can't save that 20% down, but they can actually carry a mortgage size that's larger. So the cap's gone to $1.5 million starting December 15th. We don't expect that there'll be a lot of people that will buy up to that 1.5 with a low down payment, because that is a very large mortgage to carry. But there is a portion of the market that will. The other thing that will come in January is the ability to, in an insured environment, add a secondary suite. So this is the government's attempt to address supply by allowing folks to add a secondary suite to their property for rental purposes. It will need to be legally permitted, but that will, in theory, add a little bit more to the overall supply scenario.
What do you think about that, Sharon? Like this whole solutions, is it something that you think is enough, or need more, need less?
No, I think the biggest impact. So my question, okay, so we go up to 1.5 million uninsured mortgages. Will the builders accept a 5% deposit? They're still going to look for the larger deposit. So a bit of a challenge there, but hopefully there's going to be some builders out there that will work with the purchasers, understanding, you know, if they have an actual firm mortgage approval in place, which is supporting that lower down payment, will they work with the purchasers? I mean, I think today, in many ways, we need to woo the first-time buyers back into our market, because we focused a lot on the investor market over the years that, you know, we didn't give that love and attention to those first-time buyers coming in, and they were probably migrating more to resale. So it would be nice to see the warmth come back to the first time buyers and bring them in. I think one of the biggest issues, the biggest challenges that purchasers have today, and I mean, if ever you have the opportunity to do analysis, Grace, see what the average income should be in different communities. I've seen an old one. The MQR is hurting them. You know, you've got a young adult, 25, making 125,000 a year. He thinks, yes, I'm going to go out and buy my first home, and he doesn't qualify. He needs to make 140 or 150,000 a year to qualify. So it's hurting that segment of the industry, is the MQR.
And Pauline, your
I agree. The stress test needs to go. First of all, I mean, I was talking about, like, 20 years ago, which is maybe 20 years ago, when Liberty Village was first building out, and it was a total focus on first-time buyers, single women, without buying into those condos. And I think with the market in a stasis as it is right now, this is a good opportunity to kind of refocus on that. And it's not just narrative. I mean, we all know the price point is where it is, but how we rework that to allow first-time buyers in the door. I know that's a tough one, Sherry, that you speak of about the developers. Because they need that on their balance sheet. So I don't know if there's a little give and take on the banks, and I hesitate to say that, but
it's a government issue, right? So not they didn't instill these rules. The government did, and there was a reason for it, and I understand it. But what's happened is, the cost of purchase, interest rates, and income, there's an imbalance. So you have income here, you have interest rates here, and you have home prices here. So we're hurting.
I think you're right. Absolutely right, Sherry, where people are blindsided. You're feeling good about yourself. You're 25, 27 years old. You're making $125,000. Like when I started, like I was making 29,000.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think that I'm walking into a bank, I'm feeling good about myself. What kind of mortgage can I get? I can afford that. And then all of a sudden you're being turned away, and you just get so discouraged.
Yes.
Where you feel like you have it together, and all of a sudden you don't. And
but I also think on that note, Grace, it used to be entry level was a townhouse, and then you lived there for 5 years, and you bought a small 32-foot from there, and then you bought your forever home. Everybody seems to think they have to go right to the forever home.
We've had a long time, yeah.
So that is readjustment of expectations.
That's right. And is it up to us as an industry to help shape those expectations?
Like you continue to keep.
And I would offer a different perspective on the stress test, and certainly what we've seen in renewal behavior is that even coming into higher mortgage payments when they have to renew, because they were stress tested at a higher rate, and you've seen 3-5 years of income growth, we're seeing people, while it's tough to absorb, they are primarily absorbing that higher payment. So I think the regulator would say that the stress test did its job, and helped folks stay in their home at renewal. Are there opportunities for it to be tweaked, to be more dynamic, maybe to be different for a fixed rate mortgage than a variable rate? I think there are ways that it can be readdressed, but my expectation is you won't see it go away. But
no, I don't think so too.
Amended slightly.
Yeah. But
I'm looking at the time. We've got 10 minutes. I'm wondering where you want to. No. I'm just thinking about how we want to best leverage the last 10 minutes to ensure we've got good dialogue. Shall I keep going?
Yep.
Yeah, let's skip down to the fitness of new Canadian, because we already kind of discussed the source of down payments.
Fair enough. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, why don't we go to kind of the fitness of Canadians, new Canadians?
And we've talked a bit about renewal as well. So yeah, let's move to the new Canadians. So as we look at the work that we did break out the newcomer to Canada, and thought it would be helpful to just give you a quick lens by the numbers. And we've seen the government reduce immigration targets. So these numbers reflect the new targets between now and 2026. So we are going to be welcoming well over 1 million new Canadians. They will need places to rent and purchase. You know what? This is not the new slide. This should be 1.14. And it's 22% of first-time buyers who were born outside of Canada. So I apologize for that. I added the new slide and I'm not sure where it is. But here's the line that I shared with you early. First-time home buyers are over-indexing general population in terms of feeling good about their financial future and well-being, as is the future intending buyer. And when we overlay the newcomer to Canada, they are looking very similar to the first-time buyer in terms of confidence. And the first-time intending newcomers to Canada feeling even better than general population. So we've got folks that are preparing for that large purchase by amending their monthly budget and saving more, so that they can enjoy the benefits of homeownership. This is a quick snapshot of who the insured first-time, the insured Sagen borrower is versus the newcomer to Canada borrower. And really what you can see is that they have slightly lower employment history, slightly less income. They are buying a slightly lower home. And in part, that is because they are buying more in urban markets. You can see they're buying fewer detached homes. They're buying more condominiums and townhouses than the general non-newcomer first-time buyer. There are fewer of them that are single borrowers. They are buying with a partner. But what this data tells us is that while they're buying a smaller property closer to an urban center, they are more likely to trade up more quickly within the first 5 years of purchase. And in part, that could be the intergenerational play. Perhaps others from their family are coming to Canada within that 5-year period, or they're growing their family and they need a larger property. But we're certainly seeing newcomers to Canada pay off their credit cards more so every month. They're spending less time saving for a down payment, which is why they're buying something smaller. This is one piece of advice I would give everybody, newcomers particularly, but it is make sure you're working with your professional at CIBC or others to get pre-approved. So you're not shocked when you go into market and can't afford that property that you thought you could. But it seems as though newcomers to Canada are less likely to be pre-approved before doing their home search. It really helps to ensure that you're working as folks in the housing market with people who can afford the product that you've got available to sell, and that you're being efficient with your time and theirs, and that you're avoiding the disappointment.
It's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of times, and we have our own specialized team that work directly with the builders. Is a purchaser come in to be pre-approved thinking I'm going to get that 50-footer, but we will work with them if they don't qualify for the 50-footer, is to set their expectation lower. But you know what, I can't qualify you for this one, but you know what, we can qualify you for this one, which makes the big difference. So they're not going away disappointed. They're understanding they set their expectations too high in the beginning. So I agree with you, Kiki. It is so important that the purchasers, before they put pen to paper, should have a firm understanding of what they qualify for. But there's always a difference of what you qualify for and what you're comfortable paying.
Without question.
That's the other discussion that is had with a mortgage professional as well.
Right. In just making sure we're keeping time, I wanted to answer one of the questions that we received from the audience. Sorry. And we have a William Diamond who had said, from various levels of government is that there isn't enough affordable housing, meaning subsidized housing, they can't seem to build it. The condo market has an oversupply problem, I'm just going to reread this. The level of government considered level of government considered just buying inventory units from builders. They'll probably get a better deal. I know that Pauline's a specialist at all these condos, so I'm going to toss that one over to you, Pauline.
I will say that it's far more complicated as most answers are to these questions. In Zonda Urban's tracking, we only have 119 built unsold units. We last kind of did that within Q3. And we have under construction another 8,200. So the bulk of the pre-construction inventory is actually pre-con. It is not actually underway. So there is a lot of that inventory that would have to be either the building needs to sell more or to actually start construction, or there would be some different type of financial backing at that point. That's a tough one to kind of gather on that, because if there was the opportunity to buy an under construction building, you're really going to have to figure out how you structure the building itself relative to the earlier purchasers in that building, and just management. It's a very, very complex issue. I mean, it'd be ideal for sure to definitely have some of these units purchased up, but just kind of the actual scope of what's available in the GTHA is not what you think. So
It's a good idea, though.
yes, it is.
It's a good idea, because you know what? The government wouldn't have to pay the taxes. They'd waive the taxes on the unit, so they get a better deal. So it is a good idea.
So I would like to thank everybody, but just to have a final thought wrap up, whoever wants to jump in first can jump in first, but what would be one or two ideas that you would give agency to younger generations of home buyers and newcomer home buyers today? So
Say that
sorry,
again.
so what would be one or two ideas that you would give agency to younger generations, advice for home buyers and new home buyers?
Do you want me to answer that first?
Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay. So I will say exactly what I say to my own kids. And again, as I said, I have 5 adult children. 2 of them own a home, have for a few years, and the other 3 who, you know, are single. They all make good money, but as an individual, can't still qualify. I would tell them to sit down with a financial advisor, sit down with a mortgage advisor, figure out a goal, and then work towards that goal. Create your budget. There's some an awesome budget program on the CIBC website. It's funny because we were just discussing that the other day. And myself, I'd be more than happy to help them. But it's making sure that they're making the payments that they're going to be investing in are affordable and sustainable, and that they'll be there for a longer period of time. And again, it's even my own kids think they should be, you know, in that 50-footer with, you know, the big pool, blah, blah, blah. Not that I live that way. It's adjusting their expectations. You got to start somewhere. So start here at, you know, maybe at the townhouse level, you know, so forth and so on. So it's tough. It's tough, whether I'm giving an answer as someone who works for a financial institution or giving the answer as a mom.
Amazing. Pauline, why don't I have you answer, and then we'll round it off with Kiki.
I always go for the kind of the extraordinary ones. I wouldn't be afraid to explore co-housing and buying together and getting your foot in the door with. I mean, that has to be a personality thing. You have to be very comfortable with who you're going to buy with and do all your due diligence as Sherry is speaking. But they sit down together and purchase together. You could, you know, work out some equity on that front. That's definitely something I would have considered younger going on. The other thing is just expectations. I mean, I'm probably the oddest person out in the industry, but I live in a 510 square foot condominium apartment, and, you know, I have decent furniture. So it's not, you know, all IKEA, as we like to say it, or Structure or whatever now, but you know, and I choose that because I'm close to downtown and where I can get to go, and I'm on my own. So it's kind of one of those things. It's just, you know, like I you know, it's the lifestyle. It's understanding that, you know, you don't necessarily have to have that
Everything.
really big place. Yeah, and I mean, I'll be honest, just anecdotally, I grew up sharing a bedroom, and you know, in a middle class family, and not having, you know, not being really denied much on that front, like a lot of us in our age range, right? So it's just, I think that we've had too much you know, I love to watch HTV, but maybe I shouldn't watch too much HTV. It's just what the expectations are a little out of whack, and I don't want to be mean, but I mean, it's just sometimes it just has to be said, like that. That's part of it.
Kiki?
Yeah, and so I've already shared one piece, which is absolutely work with a mortgage professional to ensure that you are pre-approved. I agree with the setting expectations, Sherry. I had a friend tell me once that her grown daughter said, oh no, I'm gonna buy a condo because that's what I can afford, but I'm gonna move you and dad in and I'm gonna live in the big house. So they're crafty, these young ones. But I think it's, you know, I would echo what this group is saying, which is get on the homeownership ladder, but do it in a way that you're not stretched every month. Because, you know, that leads to stress, unhealthy, you know, decisions being made, etc. And so I would certainly advocate that, you know, homeownership has proven for decades to be a great way to build wealth long term. So get on the ladder early, but do it in a way that is responsible and something that you can comfortably live with and sleep well at night.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to thank Kiki, Sherry, Pauline for joining us today on today's panel and for all the great insights and ideas. But what I really took away from this session is that all buyers, regardless if they are new buyers or new Canadian first-time buyers, those who prioritize their financial fitness can better navigate throughout this very changing Canadian housing market right now, and the need for affordability in housing. The need for affordability in the housing market needs also to be attainable by planning ahead, like you said, sitting with a mortgage advisor, setting realistic expectations and managing debt and leveraging those resources effectively. We'll hopefully see these two factors come together and where attainability matches affordability for buyers and lumping in all the accessibility. Hopefully we'll see a better housing market for everybody, those who are new and those who are existing. But thank you so much. So now for our draw, courtesy of CIBC, I'll send that over to Andy to do that draw. And the last Andy.
Trying to get in. Oh, somebody's cut off my video. Video back on. Let's try the video again. You shut me down.
I'd love to see you, but I think they also would just, you know.
Oh, hang on. Start your video. Okay, let me just see. Oh, there we go. There we go. Happy Halloween. It's a happy Halloween. And the winner, interestingly enough, is Jay Bennett's from Zonda Homes.
Oh my God.
That wasn't rigged. I didn't rig it at all. I wish you all the best for Halloween tonight. And as wearing this mask, I look forward to my negotiations with Prime Minister Poilievre next year at some point in time. That's my prediction. Okay.
Well done.
Have a great one, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.
If you're interested in getting involved,
continuing support of the summit, just absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much, Sherry, and your team.
So if you're
interested,
interested
in a great presentation, that was much appreciated.
Thank you.
Perfect. And if you're interested in getting involved with our program, if you're interested in getting involved with our program or becoming a sponsor, please get in touch with us. So a special thank you to our event producer, McEwitt Partnership. A special thank you to all our sponsors and supporters. So CIBC, McEwitt Partnership, Sagen, of course, Build, Aurea, Reliance, Westmount Protect, and SR Law. And thank you to you. Your support each month is what keeps us all going. So thank you to everybody in the audience today.
And
Have a great
congratulations.
afternoon, and thank you for joining us. See you next time in November when we will welcome Ben Tall to wrap up our session. So check your inboxes for details. So happy Halloween, everyone. Take care.
Halloween.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.